Dorothy Williams wiped the sweat from her forehead as she walked home from her second job at the local diner. It was almost midnight, and her feet ached from standing for 12 hours straight. First, she had worked her morning shift at the grocery store, then rushed to the diner for the evening shift. This was her life now, working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over her family's head. The winter of 1998 was brutal in Detroit. Snow piled up on the sidewalks, and the wind cut through her thin jacket like a knife. Dorothy pulled her coat tighter and quickened her pace. She needed to get home to check on her own 2 children, who were staying with her neighbor while she worked. As she turned the corner onto Maple Street, she heard something that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was crying. Not the usual sounds of the neighborhood, but the desperate sobbing of children. Dorothy looked around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The streetlights were broken, and most of the buildings on this block were abandoned. Following the sound, Dorothy found herself standing in front of an old warehouse that had been empty for years. The crying was definitely coming from inside. Her heart started racing. What if someone was hurt? What if it was a trap? This wasn't exactly the safest neighborhood, and Dorothy knew she should probably just keep walking and mind her own business. But she couldn't ignore the sound of children in distress. Dorothy had always been like this, unable to walk past someone who needed help. Her own mother used to say it would get her in trouble one day. Maybe today was that day, but Dorothy couldn't help herself. She pushed open the heavy metal door, which creaked loudly in the silence. The building smelled of mold and garbage, and it was even colder inside than outside. Dorothy pulled out her small flashlight and called out softly, "Hello? Is someone in here?" The crying stopped immediately. Dorothy could hear shuffling and whispered voices. She took a few more steps into the building, her flashlight beam dancing across broken glass and debris. "I'm not going to hurt you," she called out. "I just want to help." After what felt like forever, a small voice answered from somewhere in the darkness. "We didn't do nothing wrong, lady. We're just trying to stay warm." Dorothy's heart broke at the sound of that voice. So young, so scared. She followed the voice deeper into the building until her flashlight revealed 3 children huddled together under a pile of dirty blankets and old newspapers. They looked like they hadn't eaten or bathed in weeks. The oldest looked to be about 12, a boy who was clearly trying to be brave for the younger ones. Next to him sat a girl who couldn't have been more than 10, and the youngest was a boy around 8 years old. All 3 were shivering, their lips blue from the cold. "Oh my goodness," Dorothy whispered, kneeling down to their level. "How long have you been here?" The older boy spoke up, his voice trying to sound tough but cracking with fear. "We ain't bothering nobody. This building been empty forever. We just need somewhere to sleep." Dorothy noticed how the older boy kept his arm around the younger 2, protecting them even though he was just a child himself. It reminded her of how she felt, about her own kids, that fierce need to keep them safe no matter what. "What are your names?" Dorothy asked gently. The children looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, the girl spoke up. "I'm Keisha. This is my big brother Andre, and this is our little brother Malik." "Where are your parents, honey?" Dorothy asked. Though she was already afraid she knew the answer, Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "Our mama, she got real sick. She was using the bad stuff, you know. And she just left one day. Said she'd be back, but that was 2 months ago." Andre added bitterly, "The people from the city came and said they were going to put us in different homes, split us up. But we ran away. We ain't going to be separated. We're family." Dorothy felt tears stinging her own eyes. Here were 3 children, abandoned and alone, choosing to live in an abandoned building rather than risk being separated from each other. The love between them was so strong, so pure, that it took her breath away. "Have you eaten today?" she asked. All 3 children shook their heads. Dorothy's mind started racing. She knew she should call social services, but she also knew what Andre had said was probably true. They would likely be placed in different foster homes. These kids had already lost everything. Did they have to lose each other too? Without really thinking about it, Dorothy made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "Come on," she said, standing up and extending her hand. "You're coming home with me tonight." The children looked at her suspiciously. Andre pulled his siblings closer. "Why would you do that? You don't even know us." Dorothy smiled sadly. "Because I'm a mama too, and no child should have to sleep in a place like this, especially not in weather like this." She could see the internal struggle on Andre's face. He wanted to trust her, wanted to accept help, but he'd probably learned the hard way that adults couldn't always be trusted. "I live just a few blocks from here," Dorothy continued. "You can have hot food, warm beds, and a real bathroom, and I promise I won't split you up. You can stay together." That last part seemed to break through Andre's defenses. He looked at his younger siblings, who were staring at Dorothy with hope in their eyes, and slowly nodded. The walk to Dorothy's small apartment was quiet except for the sound of their footsteps crunching in the snow. Dorothy's mind was spinning. What was she doing? She could barely afford to feed her own family, and now she was bringing home 3 more children? Her own kids would have to share their already small space. There wasn't enough food, enough money, enough of anything. But looking at these 3 brave children walking beside her, Dorothy knew she couldn't have made any other choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant not thinking about all the reasons why it was impossible. Dorothy's apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a small living area that connected to an even smaller kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was clean and warm, and right now that felt like a palace compared to that cold, empty building. The children stood in the doorway, looking around in amazement. They seemed almost afraid to step inside, as if they thought Dorothy might change her mind at any moment. "Come on in," Dorothy said softly. "Let me get you something to eat." She went to her small kitchen and started pulling things out of the refrigerator and cabinets. There wasn't much, some leftover soup, a few pieces of bread, and some peanut butter. She heated up the soup and made sandwiches, stretching what little food she had to feed 3 hungry children. As the children ate, Dorothy studied their faces. They were beautiful kids, and she could see they had good manners despite everything they'd been through. They said please and thank you, and waited for everyone to be served before starting to eat. After dinner, Dorothy ran a hot bath for each of them. She had to be creative with clothes, giving them some of her own oversized t-shirts to sleep in and promising to figure out something better tomorrow. She made a bed for them in the living room, pulling out every blanket and pillow she owned. As she tucked them in, Keisha grabbed her hand. "Thank you, Miss Dorothy," the little girl whispered. "We ain't gonna be no trouble, I promise." Dorothy squeezed her hand gently. "You're not trouble, sweetheart. You're blessings." That night, Dorothy lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what she had gotten herself into. She had no idea how she was going to explain this to her own children. In the morning, she had no idea how she was going to afford to feed 5 people instead of 3. She had no idea what the future held. But as she listened to the peaceful breathing of 3 children who were finally safe and warm, Dorothy knew she had done the right thing. Sometimes love meant taking a leap of faith, even when you couldn't see where you'd land. And sometimes the most important decisions in life were made with the heart, not the head. 5 years had passed since that cold winter night when Dorothy brought 3 homeless children into her home. Those years had been the happiest of her life, despite the constant struggle to make ends meet. Andre was now 17, tall and strong, working part-time at a local garage while finishing high school. Keisha, 15, was one of the smartest kids in her class and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Little Malik, now 13, had grown into a curious boy who loved reading and asking endless questions about everything. Dorothy's own children had welcomed their new siblings with open hearts. The small apartment was crowded, but it was filled with laughter, homework sessions around the kitchen table, and the kind of love that money couldn't buy. Dorothy had managed to get the 3 children enrolled in school officially, and teachers often commented on how well-behaved and eager to learn they were. But life has a way of testing people when they least expect it. Dorothy's mother, Mama Rose, had been the rock of their family for as long as anyone could remember. She was the one who had taught Dorothy to always help others, even when you didn't have much yourself. Mama Rose had been so proud when Dorothy took in Andre, Keisha, and Malik. "That's my daughter," she would tell anyone who would listen. Always got room in her heart for one more. So when Mama Rose started forgetting things and getting confused, Dorothy knew something was seriously wrong. At first, it seemed like normal aging, forgetting where she put her keys, repeating the same story, twice in one conversation. But then Mama Rose got lost walking to the corner store she'd been visiting for 30 years. She started leaving the stove on and forgetting to eat. The doctor's words hit Dorothy like a punch to the stomach. Early onset dementia. Mama Rose was only 62, but her mind was slipping away day by day. The doctor explained that she would need special care, medication, and eventually round-the-clock supervision. Dorothy sat in that sterile hospital room, holding her mother's hand while trying to process what this meant. The medications alone would cost hundreds of dollars every month. The special care facility the doctor recommended cost more than Dorothy made in 6 months. Her insurance from the grocery store job covered almost nothing. "We'll figure it out, Mama," Dorothy whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. But inside, she was terrified. Dorothy took on a 3rd job, cleaning offices at night after her dinner shift ended. She sold everything valuable she owned: her grandmother's jewelry, the television, even her car. She walked everywhere now or took the bus, adding hours to her already exhausting days. She applied for every assistance program she could find, but there were waiting lists and requirements she didn't meet. The children noticed the change in Dorothy immediately. She was always tired now, always stressed. The laughter that used to fill their small apartment became rare. Andre started working more hours to help with bills. Keisha babysat neighborhood kids for extra money. Even young Malik found ways to help, collecting bottles and cans to return for the deposit money. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Mama Rose's condition got worse quickly. She had episodes where she didn't recognize Dorothy, moments where she would wander off if left alone for even a few minutes. Dorothy was at her wit's end, trying to work 3 jobs while caring for her mother and 5 children. That's when Dorothy's cousin Jerome approached her with what seemed like an answer to her prayers. Jerome had always been the black sheep of the family, in and out of trouble since he was a teenager. But he had money now, nice clothes, a fancy car. He said he was in business, though everyone knew what kind of business he really meant. "Cousin, I hate seeing you struggle like this," Jerome said one evening as Dorothy sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills and overdue notices. "I got a way you can make some quick money. Real quick." Dorothy shook her head immediately. "Jerome, you know I can't get involved in that life. I got kids depending on me." "That's exactly why you should listen," Jerome pressed. "Look, I ain't asking you to do anything dangerous. I just need someone the cops don't know, someone clean to make a simple pickup. You drive to a location, pick up a package, drive it somewhere else. That's it. 1 hour of work, and you make enough to pay for your mama's medicine for 3 months. Dorothy felt sick just thinking about it. She had worked so hard to build a good life, to be a positive example for all the children in her care. The thought of getting involved in anything illegal went against everything she believed in. But then she looked at the stack of bills on her table. The notice from Mama Rose's doctor saying they would have to stop her treatment if the account wasn't paid. The eviction warning from her landlord. The empty refrigerator. "I can't, Jerome," she said finally. "I just can't." Jerome left, but he came back a week later, and then another week after that. Each time, Dorothy's situation got more desperate. Mama Rose had been hospitalized twice, and Dorothy was facing bankruptcy from the medical bills. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning in March. Dorothy arrived at the grocery store for her shift to find a sign on the door. Closed permanently, due to financial difficulties. Her main job was gone, just like that. No warning, no severance pay, nothing. That night, Dorothy sat in her dark kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. She held the phone in her shaking hands for almost an hour before finally dialing Jerome's number. "I need to know more about that job," she whispered into the phone. The plan Jerome laid out seemed simple enough. Dorothy would drive to a warehouse on the outskirts of town, pick up a package, and deliver it to an address across the city. She wouldn't even know what was in the package. Jerome said that was safer for everyone. In and out, 1 hour, enough money to save her mother's life. Dorothy knew it was wrong. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was a mistake. But when she looked at Mama Rose sleeping peacefully in the next room, when she thought about Andre, Keisha, Malik, and her own children depending on her, she felt like she had no choice. The night of the job, Dorothy kissed each of her sleeping children on the forehead. She left a note on the kitchen table just in case something went wrong. It simply said, "I love you all more than life itself. Everything I do is for you." The warehouse was dark and quiet when Dorothy arrived. She sat in Jerome's borrowed car, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She had never been so scared in her life. A man she didn't recognize approached the car and handed her a small duffel bag through the window. "Take this to the address Jerome gave you," he said quietly. "Don't open it. Don't stop anywhere, just drive straight there." Dorothy nodded and put the bag in the passenger seat. As she drove through the empty streets, she kept telling herself that this would be over soon. One delivery, and she'd have enough money to help her mother. She'd never do anything like this again. But when Dorothy arrived at the delivery address, she realized something was very wrong. There were too many cars parked outside, too many people standing around trying to look casual. As she sat in the car, gathering courage to go to the door, she heard shouting from inside the building. Then she heard gunshots. Dorothy froze in terror as people came running out of the building. She wanted to drive away, to pretend she had never been there, but she couldn't move. It was like her worst nightmare was playing out in slow motion. Within minutes, police cars surrounded the area, their sirens wailing and lights flashing. Dorothy was still sitting in Jerome's car, the duffel bag on the seat next to her, when officers surrounded her vehicle with their guns drawn. "Get out of the car with your hands up," they shouted. As Dorothy was handcuffed and read her rights, all she could think about was the children sleeping safely in their beds, trusting that she would come home to them in the morning. She had tried to save her family, but instead, she had destroyed everything they had built together. The man who had been shot inside the building didn't survive. Dorothy learned later that she had been carrying drugs, enough drugs to trigger serious federal charges. Under the law, being present during a crime that resulted in death made her guilty of felony murder, even though she had never touched a gun and never intended for anyone to get hurt. As Dorothy sat in a cold jail cell waiting for her trial, she realized that her single moment of desperation had cost her everything she had spent years building. The children she loved would have to face the world without her, and she would have to live with the knowledge that her choices had led to this moment. The irony was crushing. In trying to save her family, she had lost them forever. The gavel came down with a sound that echoed through Dorothy's soul. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Those words felt like a death sentence, not just for Dorothy, but for the 5 children who had called her home for the past 5 years. Dorothy was 41 years old when she entered Riverside Correctional Facility. The metal doors clanged shut behind her, and she felt like her life was over. She had lost everything, her freedom, her children, her chance to care for Mama Rose. The guilt was almost unbearable, but Dorothy had never been one to give up, even in the darkest moments. Her first few months in prison were the hardest. She cried herself to sleep every night, wondering how Andre, Keisha, and Malik were surviving. Her own children had been placed with relatives, but the three she had rescued from that abandoned building had no family to take them in. They were back in the foster care system, and Dorothy's heart broke knowing they might be separated after all. The letters started arriving 3 months into her sentence. The first one was from Andre, written in his careful handwriting on notebook. "Paper. Dear Mama D," it began. That's what all 3 children had started calling her years ago. "I know you probably think we're mad at you, but we're not. We understand why you did what you did. You were trying to take care of all of us, just like you always did. I got a job at the auto shop full-time now, and I'm saving money. Keisha and Malik are with a foster family, but we see each other every week. We're going to be okay, but we miss you every single day." Dorothy held that letter and cried for hours. These children, who had already been through so much pain in their young lives, were comforting her. They weren't angry or resentful. They understood. More letters followed. Keisha wrote about her classes, how she was still determined to become a teacher. Malik sent drawings and told her about the books he was reading. Each letter was like a lifeline, reminding Dorothy that love could survive even the worst circumstances. Prison life was brutal at first. Dorothy was older than most of the women, and many had been there for years. The noise was constant, privacy was non-existent, and violence was always just beneath the surface. But Dorothy discovered something about herself in that harsh environment. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. Within her first year, Dorothy became known as someone other inmates could talk to. Women half her age would sit with her in the prison yard, sharing their stories and asking for advice. Dorothy listened without judgment and offered comfort when she could. It reminded her of being a mother, and it gave her a sense of purpose even in this terrible place. "You remind me of my grandmother," a young woman named Tanya told her one day. "She always knew the right thing to say when everything felt hopeless." Dorothy decided to make the most of her time behind bars. She enrolled in the prison's GED program, even though she had dropped out of high school to work and help support her family. Studying gave her something to focus on besides the pain of missing her children. The day Dorothy received her high school diploma at age 43, Andre, Keisha, and Malik were there in the prison visiting room to celebrate with her. Andre was 22 now, working full-time and taking night classes at community college. Keisha had just turned 20 and was studying education at a 4-year university on a scholarship. Malik, 18 and about to graduate high school, had grown tall and handsome and still loved to read everything he could get his hands on. "We're so proud of you, Mama D," Keisha said through the thick glass that separated them during visits. "Look at us. We're all still learning, just like you taught us." Dorothy felt her heart swell with pride. Despite everything that had happened, despite the system that had failed them and her own terrible mistakes, these 3 children had grown into remarkable young adults. They had taken the love and values she had given them and used them to build good lives. But Dorothy didn't stop with her GED. The prison offered college courses through a partnership with a local university, and Dorothy threw herself into learning. She studied social work, psychology, and criminal justice. She wanted to understand how the system worked, why people ended up where she was, and what could be done to help them. By her 5th year in prison, Dorothy had become an unofficial counselor and mentor to dozens of women. She helped them write letters to their children, prepare for parole hearings, and navigate the complex world of prison bureaucracy. The guards respected her, and even the warden knew her name. "Williams," Warden Patterson said to her one day, "you've become quite the leader in here. Have you ever thought about what you want to do if you get out?" Dorothy looked at him carefully. "If I get out, sir, I got a life sentence. I'm never getting out." The warden smiled slightly. "Times change, Williams. Laws change. Hope is a powerful thing." Meanwhile, on the outside, Andre, Keisha, and Malik were building the kind of lives Dorothy had always dreamed they would have. Andre had finished his associate degree and started his own small auto repair business. He specialized in fixing cars for single mothers and elderly people, often charging far less than he should because he remembered what it was like to struggle. Keisha had graduated from college with honors and was now teaching third grade at an inner-city school. She had a special talent for connecting with kids who came from broken homes, kids who reminded her of herself at that age. Her classroom was decorated with photos of all her students, and she made sure every child felt seen and valued. Malik had surprised everyone by developing a passion for law. He was in his second year at law school, studying criminal defense and prison reform. He spent his free time volunteering at legal aid clinics and reading everything he could about cases like Dorothy's. The three siblings met for dinner every Sunday without fail, no matter how busy their lives became. They always ended their meals by writing a joint letter to Dorothy, keeping her updated on their lives and reminding her how much she meant to them. "You know what I realized?" Malik said during one of these dinners when he was in his final year of law school. "Everything we've accomplished, everything we've become, it's all because of what Mama D taught us. She saved us when we were kids, and now maybe it's time for us to save her." That conversation planted a seed that would eventually change everything. Malik started spending his law school breaks researching Dorothy's case. He pored over court documents, interviewed the lawyers who had represented her, and studied changes in criminal justice law over the past decade. What he discovered made him angry and hopeful at the same time. Dorothy's sentence had been handed down during a period when the laws were much harsher, especially for drug-related crimes. Since then, there had been significant reforms in sentencing guidelines. People convicted of similar crimes were receiving much lighter sentences, and some were even having their cases reviewed. "This isn't right," Malik told his siblings. "If Mama D's case happened today, she would have gotten maybe 10 years, not life. She's been in there for 15 years already for something that was basically a first offense." Andre and Keisha were intrigued but cautious. They had learned not to get their hopes up when it came to the justice system. "But what can we do?" Andre asked. "We're not lawyers." "Well, Malik almost is, but still, how do three people who grew up in foster care fight the whole system?" Malik smiled. "We tell the truth. We tell Dorothy's story. We show the world what she did for us and what she's continued to do in prison. We find people who believe in second chances." The idea was ambitious and maybe impossible, but as Dorothy had taught them long ago in that small apartment where they had first learned what real love looked like, sometimes the most important things in life required taking a leap of faith. Dorothy, now in her 15th year behind bars, had no idea that the three children she had once rescued were planning to rescue her right back. She continued her daily routine of work, study, and helping other inmates, unaware that hope was growing stronger on the outside with each passing day. The seeds she had planted with her love and sacrifice were finally ready to bloom into something that might just bring her home. Malik graduated from law school on a sunny Saturday in May, 22 years after Dorothy had first found him crying in that abandoned building. As he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he thought about the woman who had made this moment possible. Dorothy was watching from the prison visiting room later that week when Malik showed her his law degree through the thick glass. "I did it, Mama D," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm officially a lawyer now." Dorothy pressed her hand against the glass, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. Your mama and daddy would be so proud too." But Malik had bigger news. For the past year, he had been working with a small legal aid organization that specialized in wrongful convictions and excessive sentencing cases. His supervisor, attorney Patricia Johnson, had reviewed Dorothy's case and agreed to take it on pro bono. "We're going to get you out of here," Malik told Dorothy. "I promise you that." Dorothy had heard promises like this before from other lawyers, over the years. Appeals had been filed and denied. Motions had been rejected. She had learned not to get her hopes up, but seeing the determination in Malik's eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a tiny spark of hope. The legal process was slow and complicated. Malik and Patricia had to prove that Dorothy's sentence was excessive compared to current standards, that she had been rehabilitated, and that she posed no threat to society. They needed character witnesses, documentation of her good behavior in prison, and evidence of the positive impact she had made. That's where Andre and Keisha came in. Andre had grown his auto repair business into one of the most trusted shops in the city. He employed 15 people and was known for his fair prices and honest work. But more importantly, he had never forgotten where he came from. Andre regularly hired people who were getting out of prison, giving them a second chance just like Dorothy had given him. "Every person I help," Andre told the local newspaper reporter who was writing about Dorothy's case, "I do it because a woman named Dorothy Williams taught me that everyone deserves a chance to prove they're worth something." Keisha had become one of the most beloved teachers in the school district. She had started a mentoring program for kids from troubled homes and had helped dozens of students graduate who might otherwise have dropped out. When the reporter interviewed her principal, the woman couldn't stop talking about Keisha's dedication. "She sees every child as having potential," Principal Rodriguez said. "She told me once that she learned that from a woman who took her in when she had nothing. That woman is Dorothy Williams, and if she can raise someone like Keisha, then she deserves to be free." The three siblings decided they needed to do more than just work through the legal system. They needed to tell Dorothy's story to the world. Malik created a simple website called Free Dorothy Williams, with photos from their childhood and letters Dorothy had written over the years. Andre used his business connections to spread the word in the community. Keisha reached out to other teachers and parents, sharing Dorothy's story at PTA meetings and community events. The response was overwhelming. People who had never heard of Dorothy began sharing her story on social media. The hashtag #NotYourFreeDorothy started trending locally, then regionally, then nationally. Local news stations picked up the story. The image of three successful adults who had once been homeless children, all fighting to free the woman who had saved them, captured people's imagination. The story had everything: love, sacrifice, redemption, and hope. "This is what second chances look like," Malik said during his first television interview. "Dorothy Williams made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but she did it out of love. She spent 23 years in prison helping other women, earning her college degree, and proving every day that people can change." The media attention brought unexpected allies. Other inmates Dorothy had helped over the years began speaking out. A woman named Crystal, who had been released 5 years earlier, called the news station with her story. "Dorothy saved my life in there," Crystal said. "I was 19 when I went to prison, angry and hopeless. Dorothy taught me to read better, helped me get my GED, and most importantly, she helped me believe I could be more than my mistakes. I've been clean for 6 years now, and I have a job and an apartment. That's all because Dorothy never gave up on me." More stories poured in. Women who had been released from prison and gone on to build successful lives, all crediting Dorothy with helping them during their darkest moments. Prison guards who had worked with Dorothy wrote letters to the parole board describing her positive influence on the facility. The campaign gained momentum when a prominent civil rights organization took notice. They added Dorothy's case to their list of prisoners serving excessive sentences and provided additional legal support. But the most powerful moment came when Andre, Keisha, and Malik appeared together on a national morning television show. The host asked them why they were fighting so hard for someone who had, technically, committed a serious crime. Keisha answered first. "When I was 10 years old, I was sleeping in an abandoned building, cold and hungry, and sure I was going to die. Dorothy Williams saved my life that night. But more than that, she taught me how to love, how to dream, how to believe in myself. The woman who did that doesn't belong in prison for the rest of her life. Andre nodded. People ask if we're angry at Dorothy for leaving us when she got arrested. But how can we be angry at someone who spent every day of her life trying to take care of us? She made one desperate decision to try to save her sick mother, and she's been paying for it for 24 years. That's enough. Malik looked directly into the camera. Dorothy Williams has served more time than people who committed far worse crimes. She's proven through her actions every single day for more than 2 decades that she deserves a second chance. If our justice system believes in rehabilitation, then Dorothy is the perfect example of someone who has been rehabilitated. The television appearance was seen by millions of people, and the response was immediate. The governor's office was flooded with calls and emails. Petitions circulated online. Local politicians began calling for Dorothy's release. 6 months after the media campaign began, Dorothy was sitting in her cell when a guard approached with an unusual expression on his face. "Williams," he said quietly, "the warden wants to see you, and you might want to bring your things." Dorothy's hands shook as she packed her few belongings. After 24 years, she owned almost nothing. Some books, letters from her children, a few photos. But as she walked down the corridor toward the warden's office, she felt like she was walking toward a dream. Warden Patterson was smiling when she entered his office. Sitting next to him were Malik in his lawyer's suit, Andre in his best shirt and tie, and Keisha wearing the dress she saved for special occasions. All 3 were crying and smiling at the same time. "Dorothy," the warden said, "your sentence has been commuted by the governor. You're going home today." The reunion was everything Dorothy had dreamed of for 24 years. Andre, now 39 years old, hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. Keisha, 37, kept saying, "We did it, Mama D, we did it," over and over. Malik, 35, just held her hand and smiled through his tears. As they walked out of the prison together, Dorothy looked back at the building that had been her home for more than 2 decades. It had been a place of punishment, but also of growth and healing. She had helped other women find hope in that place, and now those women would continue that work without her. The small apartment Andre, Keisha, and Malik had prepared for Dorothy was nothing fancy, just 2 rooms in a quiet neighborhood. But to Dorothy it felt like a palace. It had a kitchen where she could cook for her children again, a living room where they could sit together and talk, and most importantly, it had no bars on the windows. That first Sunday dinner as a free woman was magical. Dorothy cooked all their favorite foods while Andre, Keisha, and Malik told her stories about their lives, their dreams, their memories of growing up in her care. They laughed until their sides hurt and cried happy tears until there were no more left. As the evening wound down, Dorothy looked around the table at the 3 remarkable adults her children had become. A successful business owner, a beloved teacher, and a lawyer fighting for justice. All because she had made the choice to bring 3 scared, homeless children home with her on a cold winter night. "You saved us," Keisha said softly. Dorothy shook her head and smiled. "No, baby. You saved me."